everybody. I would like to welcome you to this amazing interview that we're about to have this morning. I just know that there are lots of people out there that are just looking for insights when it comes to finding a financial advisor that you can trust. And I've got my amazing host here, or guest here, Al Dickens. I've worked with him for over 10 years, and he's just one of those amazing people that can communicate and get right to the heart of the matter in a way that you know that he's just telling you. And I just love that because not everybody can do that. So I'm very excited to have him here as our guest today. Because, when you're talking about money, money is so personal. And letting somebody into your bubble and inside your fence, if you want to use the analogy, that takes a little bit of doing and trying to figure out, like, how do you get someone that's helping you and that you can trust and feel like, you don't want to feel like you've been taken for a ride or you should have made a better decision. So we're going to be talking about that. And one of the things I definitely learned from Al is you start building trust is right at the beginning with education. And that's kind of where you have to start when you don't know each other. So that's what we're going to do today is we're going to give some education. We're going to share some new ideas with you so that you can start to understand, how do you build those relationships? And just really excited to talk about that. One of the things that Al does, and I'm going to read this acronym because I just can't memorize it for some reason, is we also like to use this model called LEAP. It's the Lifetime Economic Acceleration Process. Mm-hmm. And because finance is such a big problem, and it really is a kind of you need to look at it holistically because we have things like our car insurance, our home insurance, our umbrella, our life insurance, disability insurance. Then we have IRAs, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, annuities. Then you have savings accounts and bank accounts. And then you have businesses or real estate. So it gets to be like a large bubble of all things money. So this model is a really good way to try to get your hands around everything and pull it together in a way that makes sense, because otherwise it can just make your head go too much. Yeah. So Al, welcome. So glad to have you here today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Tara.
And I just want to make a quick announcement before we jump in is if you're watching the show, it's going to be recorded, and you can also share this with your friends because there's probably people that that would like this information as well. And that's what we're trying to do is we're trying to get out good information to as many people as possible. So I was going to jump in with a quick story, Al, and then I'm going to just want to get that goodness from you.
Okay.
So Al was like I said, was one of my favorite educators. And I wanted to start with a little bit of psychology and, of course, a flying story. What's that joke? How do you know there's a pilot in the room? Don't worry. So we had this early on when I was in pilot training. They had this extra duty that they had us do where we had to go up in the tower. And our job was to stand there with a pair of binoculars and just watch the planes coming in. And every plane that came in, we were just supposed to make sure the gear was actually down. And it was always funny because one of the instructors I flew with called it your career check. Make sure that gear's down. Because he had actually landed one time without his gear.
Which is a problem.
That's a whole other story. So anyway, that was just a job. But when I was there, I just found myself getting drawn into like, okay, well, gear down, got it. But what about the people that are taking off? And then people are flying around the pattern and you got people coming into the pattern. There's a lot of different things going on. And it was really interesting because they told me, hey, just check for gear. Stop looking at the whole picture and everything. And it was at that point I started to really realize that people's brains work differently. And, some people need to go from the outside in. They need the big picture and then they get down to the details. Where some people like to start from the inside out and they want the details and then they'll eventually get to the big picture. And so that was what really drew me to this model because it's got all the detail, but it's also combined in a big picture. So Al, would you just kind of talk a little bit about like the big picture of LEAP and from your perspective, like how do you use that as a tool?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tara, one of the things that I find is most of the people that I've met with, they've worked with different people at different times for different reasons under different circumstances. So all that difference lends itself to confusion, and a lot of times it lends itself to waste. And so what they're wanting is, in this busy world that we live in, how can I take all that different that I've been exposed to, that I've implemented, that I've forgotten, and how can I put it on one piece of paper one model that will allow me to understand how all of those different people are interacting. And to me, that's what really, in 1994, when I was introduced to the LEAP model, that's the thing that really drew me to it is here's one page, not a 30-page financial report. Here's one page where everything that a client is doing with all of those different people can be represented. And then macroeconomically, we can see how are those decisions working together and how are they working in conflict. And nobody intends it to work in conflict. It's just because of the timing or the different people or the different circumstances lends itself to conflict. And the model points that out.
So you touched on a thing and that I think is really important is that model will capture things that, like, for myself as a financial advisor, that I don't do, but need to be captured in that model. And like, cause I don't do car insurance and home insurance, right. But as part of an overall picture, we need to know what's happening because it's how that money all works together and how, you know, just talk about that a little bit more. Cause that's really important. Cause I think sometimes people are like, well, I already have a financial planner. Excellent. But do you have all the pieces working together?
Right, exactly. And I think what you just said, all the pieces working together, I think I used this analogy last week and I'll use it again, is if you think of all the financial advisors, your banker, your CPA, your attorney, your insurance advisor, your investment advisor, all of them are very talented, kind of like think of them as musicians. And if you put them in an orchestra pit, they obviously know how to play their instrument. But if there's no sheet of music, then they just play when and how they want to. The client ends up getting a bunch of noise, not the symphony they expect. And so what role that I play in the model's role is to get everybody playing off the same sheet of music. So the property and casualty advisor, when they're talking about deductibles where the client understands what their liquid position is at the bank and they coordinate those. The attorney who's drawing up a will and a document and estate plan understands what the insurance advisor has in place so that beneficiary designations can be coordinated. We talk about working with the CPA and their investment advisor. So when it comes to tax time, is the investment advisor doing all the tax harvesting that they can in order to make sure that the client and the CPA's situation is having them pay as little in taxes as possible? So without somebody, kind of like you talked about with the air traffic controller, somebody that is central to making sure planes are landing and planes are taking off and those that are landing have their gears down, we kind of do the same thing. We just happen to use the model, whereas maybe an air traffic controller has a radar where they're making sure all the planes are flying correctly. We just simply use the model.
And then I'm going to ask another twist on that question. So I kind of find at this point, Al, that a lot of my clients really want to know the answer to three big questions. They want to know, how much is enough? Do I need 5 million, 10 million, whatever? Am I on track to get there?
Right.
And am I paying too much in taxes? So how do you get at those kind of questions?
So the first question is how much is enough? Well, everybody has what we call a maximum financial potential with their age, their income, the amount that they're saving. There's a number out there in the future that represents their maximum financial potential. What we do is we use the model to project what that potential is based on what they're currently doing. And then what we do is rather than aim at a target that's 20, 30, 15, 5 years down the road, what we're trying to do is put together 1 year perfect models. So if I'm working with you on a long range basis, Tara, if we can put together a series of 1 year perfect models, wherever we get to in the future is the best that we could have done. Too often, I find that people come to me who have maybe worked with someone in the past, and the question they were asked is, well, how much do you need when you retire? Well, if you ask a 35-year-old, they have no clue how much they're going to need because nobody knows what the world's going to be like in 30 years. So that's a ridiculous question. What we really need to be doing is, what can we do right now for the next 12 months to put you and your model in the situation to track towards you reaching your maximum financial potential? And then wherever we get to is the best you could have gotten.
I love that. So, one of the things that I've come across as I'm working on my book is this idea of the latte factor. And I see it happen a lot where there's a lot of advisors where, like, step one is, let's figure out how we can make your life smaller. Let's see what we can cut out of your life, how you can tighten your belt. And that seems like almost the first step in financial planning. And that's not really what we do with Leap, is it?
No, it's not. It is that there's really two phases to it. First is when you look at the money that a client is putting into the model. Let's say that they're saving 7%. They're saving 7% of their income into their model. So what we want to do is, can we get their savings rate above 7? Ideal is 15, and I'll explain to you in a minute why 15 is the ideal. But most of the time when you tell people that the ideal is 15 and they're only saving 7, their first reaction is, well, I'm going to have to change my lifestyle to save more. Well, no. What we really want to do is use the model to say, where are you wasting money? So I'm going to use an analogy. It's June. It's hot here in North Carolina. We're starting to get humid. The air conditioners are running. I live in an 87-year-old house. So if I walk into the front door and my house is too hot, my initial reaction is go turn the thermostat down and make the air conditioner generate more cool air. Well, that carries with it more cost. The other option is, why don't I walk around the house and make sure that our lab, who loves to go out the back door, has gone out the back door, but somebody realized it and shut the door so we're not losing all that hot air. My daughter, who loves to sleep with the window open, that's fine at night, but I have to remind her, Bess, you need to shut the window when you wake up in the morning because we don't want all that cool air going out during the heat of the day. It's an 87-year-old house. I haven't been up in the attic in forever. I don't know if all the insulation that's in the attic is still in place. So what I find, Tara, is most people who want a cooler house, most people that want to build more wealth, they try to throw more money at the problem. Whereas we use the model to find out where they have open doors and open windows and insulation that's missing. And when we correct those problems, all of a sudden we find that the client, without having to change their lifestyle, without having to save more money, are actually able to keep more of what's being generated. Does that make sense?
That really makes sense. And I like that idea, is like, before we start saying how to make your life smaller, let's look at what you're doing and make sure that we, with the same amount of money, just make some better decisions and better choices. And then you're going to be there. And that's, to me, that's got to be the first step.
Right.
And,
I mean, the first thing that I do with a client is, once we gather their data and I put it on the model, is we find all the conflicts and the inefficiencies. And what I find is, on average, my clients are wasting 1 to 5% of their income, whether it be in taxes that they're paying that they shouldn't, whether it's premiums that they're paying too high where they could restructure them lower, or debt that isn't structured properly. So if I show those problems in those situations and we correct them, all of a sudden 1 to 5% of their income comes flowing back into their situation that they can either reapply back into the model to save more, or to put it in their lifestyle and go do something, or take a trip and enjoy, or do a little bit of both.
Now, here's a question for you. So I have a new doctor that's just reached out, and he's interested because I've helped another doctor.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I don't know that I want to spend all this time filling out this model. I just want to do a short consultation. Yeah. And it's a normal reaction for people, because they look at our model and they go, ooh, that's a lot of information to put together. Right. How about you just give me a simple quick fix?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I get the same thing. And again, I will help you with as much information as you want to give me. Mm-hmm. I'll always use the model, just like I had a meeting this morning training a group, and it was a young gentleman, a young advisor, and he was working with a client who was putting money into a qualified plan and wasn't sure that was the best place to put it. That was the only information that we were given, and we were able to help them understand the drawer on the model they've chosen for retirement versus other options. And when we compared all the options, they decided that, hey, where I'm putting my money is not the best place, and they did something differently. Now, we just did it in one drawer. And if that client ever wants to expand to look at the other 26 drawers in the model, we certainly can do that. But it's up to the client and what they want to get out of the relationship.
So it really does have to be a partnership, because an advisor can't make money appear, but you can certainly help people understand the best way to maximize what they're doing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important, because I think sometimes people think, well, an advisor is going to just magically make money for them. And so it's this education process. Right. Now, can you talk a little bit about, I love visuals, and we talk about like this, if you looked at a circle and it was a piece of pie and you cut it into 3 areas.
Yes.
And we have like these, like your financial world at a high macro level can be boiled down to 3 big areas: your your lifestyle, what you pay to the government, and oh my gosh, what's the
What you pay to the financial institutions, corporations,
financial?
the other third.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that process? Because for people listening, because we do, one of the things I like is that we do the macro picture first before we get down into the details.
Yeah.
How do you break that down into those three big areas?
Sure. I do that all the time because one of my promises to my clients when I meet them initially is I won't work with them if they have to take $1 out of their lifestyle. And you kind of think about that. And a lot of times you'll see a wry smile or you'll see them kind of look at you funny. And whether they say it, and if they don't say it, I'll ask them, I'll say, does that sound too good to be true? And they go, yeah. And then I'll draw a circle. Now, what I tell them is inside this circle is every dollar of income that you make, every financial relationship that you're involved in, and every product that you own. Now, I'll then divide the circle up into thirds. Well, roughly a third of all that money is going to the government in the form of taxes. I'm not saying everybody's in a 33% tax bracket, but on average, that's kind of where it comes out. If you look on the normal average client situation, roughly a third of their money goes to insurance premiums, mortgage payments, retirement savings, etc. And then they're keeping roughly a third for their lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So if you kind of have that mental picture of a circle divided up into thirds, kind of like a Mercedes emblem, okay? One of the questions I asked them is, seeing where your money's going, which would be the last third that you would want me to take money from? And they go, lifestyle. I go, great. And what I promise you and what you want are in alignment. Now, what we find is you typically are wasting money by paying more money in taxes. You're wasting money by paying more money to the financial institutions and the corporations. So if we could get some of that money back, then that's money that we could use to work with together without you having to change your lifestyle. So hopefully what I've said verbally in the mental picture that you have in your mind, you begin to see how the pie doesn't have to get bigger. We don't have to take any from your lifestyle. We're just taking it from the government, the financial institutions, and get it back in our clients' hands.
Great. So let's take a minute if we can, and I'd like to just do a deeper dive into each of those sections, just to give people like an example to wrap their head around it, because I love this when people grasp this concept. They're like, it's like a whole new world opened up. Sure. And this is the part I love about doing financial planning and advising with people is taking what they're doing and just showing them by how organizing it better, their life can be so much better. And that's just, I love that feeling. Sure. So let's just start with the financial institutions. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you a simple example. I worked with a young couple the other day. They had $25,000 in a money market account, and they had a $100 deductible on their auto insurance. And I asked them this question. I said, okay, if you have an accident, it's your fault. You do $1,000 worth of damage to your car. Are you going to go to your money market account, take $1,000 out and get your car fixed? Or are you going to turn the claim in and pay your $100 deductible? They said, oh, Al, that's easy. We're going to go to the money market account and just pay cash to get our car fixed. And I go, why would you do that? And they go, well, our property and casualty advisor told us when we turn a claim in, our premiums are going to do what? Go up.
Go up.
So we can afford $1,000. So we would just take it out of the money market so our premiums don't go up. Well, then my question is, why then are you paying a higher premium for a $100 deductible that you just told me you would never use? And they never thought about it. Well, one of the things that we did was call the property and casualty advisor, change the deductible from 100 to 1,000. Obviously, when you raise the deductible, it lowers the premium. Mm-hmm. So when the premium was lowered, that was money that was coming back to the client to then put somewhere else in the model, which in their case, they didn't have an umbrella liability policy. So we used the premium savings from changing the deductible to pay for the umbrella liability policy so that they have more protection at the same cost.
So more protection, and that didn't take a single dollar out of their pocket.
It was just a coordination of different drawers in the model to make them aware of inefficiencies that, again, if you don't have the model and you say, well, I got a money market account and I've got car insurance. Okay, great. And most people move on. Is how are those working together or in conflict?
And then you did that team thing, right? So you brought that property and casualty guy in there. And so you had that whole team working as well.
Right.
And I think people forget, like, all these different people they're all members of your team, whether you realize it or not. And I think people don't realize you already have a team. They just may not be working together.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to my analogy of the musicians. You know, the property casualty guy and the banker know how to play their instrument. We just got to get them playing off the same sheet of music.
Right. So that's a great example. So now, like, what about for taxes? That's like, is there's like something that people can go, oh, okay, now I can wrap my head around what you're talking about.
Sure. So a lot of people have a goal, Tara, of paying their house off early. Let's say someone says, I want to pay my house off in 15 years. Well, most people in our financial world are sold a 15-year mortgage. Okay. And obviously we get to deduct the interest on that 15-year mortgage. Well, if I'm able to introduce a strategy using a 30-year mortgage, but the 30-year mortgage allows them to take the savings in their mortgage payment versus the 15, do something with it that would allow them to pay their house off in 15 years, but not have a 15-year mortgage to do it. And then we compare the tax deductibility of the mortgage interest on the 30-year versus the 15. There's a lot more taxable interest deductions on the 30. So we still meet their goal, but with a strategy to allow them to save more taxes over that 15-year period. So that gives them, in that 1/3 going to the government, an opportunity to lower their taxes.
So I love that example, Al, but this is a tough one because paying off the home is like such an emotional satisfaction. And so it's really interesting where you can show somebody the numbers on paper and say, we can do this. And this strategy is going to help you. It's going to help your bottom line be bigger. But that's a real thing, that emotion, that satisfaction of paying off that home. How do you talk about that with folks? Because, and there's a lot of information out there that just says, pay off your home, pay off your home, pay off your home.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not saying pay off your home early is a bad thing. I'm just saying with most people's financial objectives, Tara, there's two ways to get there. There's a product and there's a strategy. So, for example, going back, if someone says, I want to pay my house off in 15 years, well, the product solution to that is a 15-year mortgage. If you say, I want to pay my house off in 15 years, I want to educate them about a strategy opportunity to do the same thing. We're going to reach the same goal. I just need to make sure you need to understand the two and what are the benefits of both. So, for example, if the 15-year mortgage has a mortgage payment of $2,500 a month, and the 30-year mortgage has a mortgage payment of $2,000 a month, well, the client gets to keep $500.
Right.
And they also get the increased tax benefit. So if they take the $500 of savings and the tax benefits and they invest it over 15 years, then in 15 years, they would have enough money to pay the 30-year mortgage off.
Right.
And if they do really well, they might have some money to pay the mortgage off and have some money left over.
So you've created the option. So they can still pay that thing off in 15 years if they want to, but they may look at it and say, I've got this nice nest egg. I'm going to keep that over here and I'm going to take advantage of that tax deduction.
Right.
So you're not telling them that they can't satisfy that emotional need. You're saying, of course you can do that, but let me show you a different way to get there.
Right. If you pay your house off in 15 years with the 15-year mortgage, here's the tax savings. If you do it with a strategy, and the strategy is using a 30-year mortgage, but you still get to pay your house off in 15 years, and here's a bigger tax savings, now you have a decision to make.
Right. Okay. So it's a really interesting, as I'm writing this book and learning and talking now it's money is very little to do with math, and it's so much to do with all that emotional baggage we have.
Right.
And it's an interesting process. So I'm really glad that you're sharing with us these ideas about how do you get into the psychology of it. It's not just about, it's so little to do with the numbers. Like the numbers will show you how to get there, but it's understanding the strategy, and it's not what we're taught, and it's not what we see in the media all the time. So it's people are like, oh, that sounds like magic.
Well, it's like I tell people all the time. One of the first things I learned when I was introduced to Bob Castellone, who developed the whole LEAP system, one of the very first workshops I ever went to, he talked about all of the media and all of the advice and everything we're bombarded with as being financial pornography, which I love that. Because what we're trying to do is really weave through all that to the truth and how it really applies to the client. Right.
I love it. And so then that brings us down then to the lifestyle. And so looking at this pie, the goal is that, so we're looking at it retirement, and that's off in the future, but we're living today.
Right.
And so then how do you talk about that lifestyle piece once we've looked at the other pieces?
Well, again, the goal is to teach our clients to live on 85% of their income so that they can save 15. Mm-hmm. There are 5 major eroding factors that basically, if you think about a piranha, eating something in the Amazon, well, that's what these eroding factors do to our money. They just kind of eat at our money. And those 5 eroding factors are inflation, taxes, market volatility, planned obsolescence. So what that means is things that we own that basically we're not going to drive the same car for 30 years. We're not going to have the same roof on our house. The dishwasher is going to break. It's going to become obsolete and I got to replace it. And then the 5th is technological change. So the money we spend in our lives to upgrade, to keep pace with technology, those are monies. Now, I don't have the time here today, but if you take those 5, just think of inflation. Most people think of inflation at 3%. Well, each of these factors has a 3% factor. So 5 times 3 is 15. So if the world's taking through these eroding factors 15% of our money away every year, we've got to be at least saving 15%.
Right.
So that we can then begin to help the client begin to work in a positive manner.
Exactly. I love that. So that just breaks it down. And yeah, so I'm getting all excited because this is so fun when you can sit down with somebody and just shift their whole world. And it starts with not saying, well, you can't go on vacation. You got to stop going to Starbucks. That's not where it starts. It starts with streamlining what we're doing. So boy, this time has just flown by. So Al, you're getting ready to start this really cool thing with your practice called the Power Hour. So would you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I'm super excited about it.
Perfect. So, and I use some of them today. There's language. There are things that I've learned through my 34 years in the business that I call power phrases. There are things that I think help clients better understand opportunities for their money. And so my goal with these power hours is to kind of take these power phrases and then when would you use them? How would you share them with the client? What would you want to use them for to support them learning something economically? And then what are the calculators to verify it? So for example, I just said one, which is every economic goal that you have, there's a product approach and a strategy approach. That's a power phrase. So then when would I use it? Well, I might use it with a client who's considering whether to use a 15-year mortgage or a 30-year mortgage to pay their house off in 15 years. And then go into the software. Okay, how can we prove the rate of return and the tax savings, et cetera, that they would be needing to earn with a 30-year mortgage in order to get them to pay the house off in 15 years. So those are discussions with a lot more verification with the software using the model that you described on these Friday calls.
So I love it. So I'm going to just wrap up really quick because this show has just flown by. And I tell you guys, if you're ever talking with Al, the time will just fly by because it's so much fun. But so Al really shared with us about the LEAP model. It takes your whole financial world like a piece of pie, divides it up into 3 areas, and you start to look at where do you find ways that you can maximize what you're doing so that you're not paying money where you shouldn't pay money. You don't want to pay more in taxes. You don't want to pay more to financial institutions for your insurances and things. So looking for all of that is the first step. And then Al talked about his power hour. And this is something that's really important to me as I'm writing this book is I really want to get at the emotional baggage and the things that drive our decisions. And Al's talking about this power hour, talking about how you talk to people. And it's really important because it's not manipulative. It's talking to people so you can understand concepts in a new way. Because if you've grown up and seen the world through one lens or one paradigm, you know what makes sense to you because that's what you've been taught. But when you start to have a story or something that shifts and you go, oh, wow, I hadn't looked at it that way, then you start to do better. And one of the things I'm always trying to grow with and I'm writing my book about is how do I get you as people to help you help yourself? And it's got to be like this co-creative process where you can have your advisor that ideally should be a great coach and be showing you like, hey, let me show you how the world could also work. And then you, as the client or the person trying to grow your retirement, can be open-minded and say, okay, let me sit with that. And then the model then just comes in at the end, like it's the verification, right? So we've looked at the strategy and we've got the ideas, and then you just have the numbers that go, yep, that actually works.
Yep.
So we just talked about so much today. So Al, so for folks listening today that are really interested, because I know you do amazing coaching and you really are working a lot with financial advisors now as opposed to just clients. So you kind of do the whole thing. How do they get a hold of you?
Probably the best thing would be to go to my website. I know I've saw it kind of stream across the bottom of the screen, but it's just al-dickens, Dickens.com. And it has on there a lot of ways to connect, whether it be a 30-minute consultation just for us to get to know each other and how I might be able to help, or whether it be to register for some of the free power hours, one this Friday, one the following Friday, or to set up some one-on-one coaching or speaking engagements. So the website has all the details for how I might be able to help them and how we connect.
Great. So everybody, don't forget, please share this interview with all your friends on social media, because there's a lot of great information here, and we're trying to change the world to help people do better
Absolutely.
for themselves. So, I can't wait to hear about all your success, and I will talk with you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tara. Blessings all.